Hello, this week's episode is about to start in 60 seconds, but before it does, we just wanted to say a big hello and a huge thank you to our very first subscriber, Robbie Stanley. Thank you so much, Robbie.
Thank you, Robbie.
It means so much, and we're so thrilled that you enjoy the podcast so much. Thank you. Now, if anybody else listening would like to get involved and help us keep the lights on in Thrift Shop Biography HQ, then head on over to our Facebook page and we'll put a link at the top where you can also get involved. But come over to the Facebook page anyway, because it's a lot of fun and we talk about each week's episode on there. It's called, just go to Facebook and search for Thrift Shop Biography. So thank you everyone for listening. We love making this podcast. We really do. Let's get straight in with this week's episode. We hope you enjoy it. And welcome to Thrift Shop Biography. This is the one about Billy Idol. Thank you for listening. Hello.
Oh, hello, Richard.
Oh, hello, Cleo. I keep forgetting that we're saying our names now.
We have names.
We have names. How are you doing?
I'm all right.
Good.
Are you all right?
Yeah, I'm all right, thanks.
Good.
So you found the autobiography of Billy Idol. What's it called?
did.
Dancing with Myself.
Yes, which I didn't realise was one of his songs.
Oh, it's a classic.
Yeah, well, I now see that, and it was a big hit, but I didn't know that one.
Well, it wasn't really a hit in the charts at the time. I think it's kind of like retrospectively became an anthem.
I see.
It didn't make like the top 40 or anything.
Oh.
That's why you don't know it.
But to me, I'd have said Billy Idol, White Wedding. Or Billy Idol, Hot in the City. Oh, Rebel Rebel. That would have been a good title.
Rebel Yell.
Rebel Yell, that's what I meant. Yeah, but because those are the songs I know really well.
Do you know what? Reading this book really I was a big fan in the 80s, but he's one of those people that kind of then fell by the wayside, so I didn't continue to follow him. And this book reminded, because obviously when we read these books, we go and listen to the music and stuff. It reminded me how many good tunes he had.
I know.
Wow.
He really did. I've seen him come back, though. It was around lockdown-ish time, and he came back with Miley Cyrus.
Oh, that's amazing.
Sort of resurrected him.
That performance.
He's still got it.
Yeah, he was 61 in that performance, holding his own with Miley Cyrus, and that's an amazing performance.
Yeah, it's really cool.
Yeah, I watched it like yesterday.
Did you?
Yeah, because I remembered it at the time, and then I'm so into Billy Idol at the moment.
Oh, excellent.
You know, when you read these books, do you like just completely fall in love with that person for a week? And
each week, totally obsessed. Absolutely obsessed. I talk to everybody about that one person, and the next week they're forgotten. It's like, no, this is the person you need to know about.
Yeah, I always think, I'm so glad I've rediscovered this person. I'm going to be a fan again forever. And then we're on to the next book, and that person completely takes over.
Yes.
But for this week, it's been Billy Idol, and it's been amazing.
It's been an amazing week.
Rediscovering him.
What a dude.
Yes. So, needless to say, you are a fan.
Yeah, I love it. All of his hits is what I know. Never owned an album. Didn't know anything about him. Did you?
Yeah, I did, because I was a fan in the 80s, so I knew quite a bit about him. And I had a couple of his albums. So,
oh, great.
Yeah. So, look, I mean, I could rave about him all day long, which is good because we're doing a podcast about him. But should we just get into it now?
Let's do it.
Okay, let's do it.
Another person who got named after their own dad.
Yeah.
Because his dad was called William Broad, and he's called William Broad.
Born in 1955 in North London. So his dad was a typewriter salesman, right?
Yeah.
And then he just sold like shop fittings and stuff. And his mum was a nurse, and they met in like 1950. The mum actually had to convert from being a Catholic to a Protestant to marry William Broad Sr. And her parents didn't talk to her for marrying him until little William Broad Jr. was born.
Yeah, that'll do it. Cute little bleached blonde baby. Well, I think it's interesting as well that his dad ran a pub and died of liver disease. He was an alcoholic. And his mum's family were all musical. So those are the two things. Getting off your head and music.
Yeah.
One from your dad, one from your mum. It's that simple.
He's carrying on the family traditions.
Yes. Basically, yeah. So, in 1958, he was nearly 4, and his dad upped and moved the family to America.
Yeah, that's probably quite a big deal in that time, wasn't it?
Really big deal, yeah. And there's just really great reading about 50s America through a little kid's eyes, or the cartoons, the cars, the way he saw it was just, everything was amazing to him. It was Long Island they went to at first. So we get to see New York at 4 years old.
Yeah.
And then they moved out to Fire Island, which is idyllic. Like, his dad was playing golf, hunting, fishing, swimming, just an idyllic life. Unless you're a kid with a British accent who gets beaten up for being British. He got beaten up so badly when he was still just 3 that he actually had to go to hospital with a hernia.
Oh my
so
God,
kids are beating up a nearly 4-year-old to the point of hospitalisation. Kids are horrible, scary people.
New York was rough.
Isn't this idyllic Fire Island, as far as I'm concerned? Brutal, isn't it?
Yeah. He talks about music, like his first experiences of music, and his mum's record collection was a lot of jazz with like Count Basie, Duke Ellington, which surprised me really, because you don't actually think of that when you think of Billy Idol at all.
Yeah.
But he's getting into music through his parents at an early age. But he says one of his first musical experiences was listening to the soundtrack of Camelot, and it's Richard Burton.
Yeah.
And obviously Richard Burton isn't much of a singer. He kind of talks his songs. And he said that listening to Richard Burton, he heard somebody sing something and sounding a bit bored and lackadaisical. He said it had the effects of like alcohol in his voice. And I think that's almost, he's kind of saying that could be his first experience of hearing somebody perform something musical that wasn't in the traditional sense. It's almost a bit punk.
Yeah.
Because it was a different delivery.
Definitely. Punk to him isn't just music at all. It's an attitude.
Oh, I guess Richard Burton was a bit punk, really, in the realms
I think
of
he
Hollywood.
was. He was rock and roll before rock and roll.
Those hard drinking.
Yeah, hard drinking actor rockers.
Did he ever trash a hotel room?
Probably. Oh, no doubt. Him and Liz, they used to beat each other up. And then the room, smash all the glasses. You know it. It surprised me, the really wide variety of music that he's into. Yeah, it's really good. So he's got music in his life, and he's got war, because he's obsessed with war. And he's reading everything about the American Revolution. As soon as he learns to read, he's really soaking up history. He's a really quite square. He's devouring books, he says. He's reading about Romans, the Stone Age Egyptians, Odysseus. He's quite nerdy, as the best people are.
It's just certainly nothing you could equate with the Billy Idol that we know.
Exactly. You find out you don't really know him.
Yeah, I kind of think that happens sometimes. Like the nerdiest people at school turn into the biggest rebels when they hit teenage and discover girls and drugs.
I totally agree. The actual coolest people I know were usually bullied and were usually square and nerdy, because it technically means you're outside of the norm. And as you grow up and stay outside of the norm, it becomes cool. Basically, nerds are always grow up to be the coolest people.
Yeah.
It's just that. Yeah. And I include us.
Yes, we are the coolest people.
Yeah.
So he had a little sister born a couple years later in 1959, Jane.
Yeah.
She inspires a song later on, which is the only reason I'm mentioning her now.
Yes. White Wedding.
But then they hadn't really been in America that long, only 4 years. In 1962, Dad gets a job back in the UK. So after becoming and converting to being a proper little Yankee American kid and developing an American accent, he's back in England. Now, getting bullied for being an American kid.
I know, he can't win, the poor bugger. Yeah, he's there from age 5 to 7, where they moved to, which was Dorking. That sounds stupid, doesn't it?
Do you think Dorking grew up to be cooling?
Yes.
They went to Dorking and then they soon moved to Goring by the Sea, which is a part of Worthing, which is near Brighton. So he's on the south coast.
He's on the south coast.
Yeah.
He was a stranger in his own country. He had an accent. He had different words. He couldn't play soccer. Couldn't even say it right. Football. And music saved him, he says.
Yeah, well, he says in 1963, on his 8th birthday, his parents gave him a Beatles record, which kind of, many a young musician, the Beatles inspired a lot of them, didn't they?
So many. Yeah. And it also saved him because he needed glasses and he was getting called a four-eyes squinty git. And then finally John Lennon comes along wearing glasses and finally it's cool. They saved him in many ways.
They did.
But yeah, he says the Rolling Stones came along as well, and he says that he feels like that was the root of punks, because it was the punk mentality.
Right,
Because it
yes.
spoke to kids, and it said that your destiny is up to you. You know, you can take control of your life. It just, there was this whole new wave of feeling of independence. And, you know, you weren't just on this treadmill towards a boring job. You could maybe escape and be something else. And it changed all their lives. Changed so many people's lives.
It's amazing, really, that whole culture change. It really was like a revolution that we can't comprehend.
It was.
You know, teenagers didn't even exist. Like, I think they only came into existence in the 1950s, like the phrase teenager.
Yeah, that's right.
And I think it's like after the war, when the economy started going, and then teenagers started getting a bit of their own money and could go out and buy their own shirts and put Brill cream in their hair and buy records. And then they became a section of society who contributed to the economy, and they were marketed to. And so the term teenagers was coined. But before that, they kind of didn't exist. You just went to school and then became an adult.
Yeah, and you were still told what to do. You didn't have freedom of expression or anything. You had to conform.
Yeah, the whole rock and roll thing with the Beatles and the Rolling Stones, it really was like a rebellious revolution.
Yeah, it really was. And it just led to punk.
Yes, it did.
And then that just led to the 80s, and it all went downhill from there. Consumerism.
Yeah, and it all ended with Coldplay headlining Glastonbury. The dream has well and truly died.
Oh, poor Coldplay.
No.
So I absolutely love how important fashion is to him. He talks about fashion almost as much as music. Whenever he talks about a music change, he always talks about the clothes that changed with it. It was that time again where they just went completely hand in hand. And of course, we covered this a lot with our Vivienne Westwood episode, because he's completely and utterly part of that whole world. Well, he becomes it anyway, yeah.
The one thing that I've noticed this week since rediscovering him and going on and watching his music videos is how strong and unique his image was in the 1980s. And what surprises me is when we think of those classic 1980s looks like Madonna, Prince, Michael Jackson, and even like Boy George and Adamant and Cyndi Lauper, they all have real strong images. Well, actually, Billy Idol did. And I think that he should be referenced in the same way that all those people I've just mentioned are. Because that blonde hair and the leather waistcoat and the crucifixes and stuff, it was such a strong image. And I feel that he should get more credit for that.
Yeah, you're right. He was insanely good looking as well. We must point this out. His face is just structured like a statue of a god. He's beautiful. He's absolutely beautiful.
It is perfect. Almost in the way, he's almost like a 1980s bleach blonde Elvis.
He very much is, yeah.
Because he had that sneer thing going on as well. And
he did. I mean, copied Elvis, obviously.
Yeah.
Everyone did.
Oh, I think part of his success and why he was kind of like the punk that really broke through to mainstream American success in no part is due to just how handsome he actually is.
Exactly, yeah. Anyway, back to the 70s.
He's still in school.
Yeah.
He said that his granddad got him a Ringo Starr branded snare drum.
Yeah.
And his granny had already bought him a banjo. So this is coming from the musical side of the family.
I was going to say his parents forced him to have violin lessons as well.
Oh, yeah, didn't they?
Yeah. Anyway, carry on. He's got a drum. He's playing a violin.
But he also buys himself a guitar for £5, but his parents won't let him have guitar lessons. They make him have the violin lessons. He's like, I've got a guitar here. Yeah, I guess if they're like an Irish descendants, a violin would have been more suitable for that music
folksy,
than a guitar would be, maybe.
Yeah.
As he gets older, he's starting to go to rock concerts and stuff.
Yeah, he's absolutely where it's at, isn't he?
Yeah, he's seen bands like Hawkwind and Black Sabbath.
Yeah, Deep Purple. Yeah, I mean, he's really, really at the right place at the right time.
Yeah, so I mean, he's in Worthing, but actually it's not far from London. The family moves around quite a bit, and actually it's not long after that his dad starts another business, which means they move to Kent, which is nearer London. And now he's getting to be a teenager and he's growing his hair long. He's at secondary school, but like we were saying, he's still, even though he's becoming cooler in himself, he's still an outcast. And he says only 2 or 3 of the other boys were actually like him.
Yeah.
And they really felt disenchanted and the odd ones out. So he started bunking off school to play music with these other two boys.
And when you say he moved to Kent, that's Bromley. It's worth mentioning. It's important that it's Bromley because he becomes famous for being part of the Bromley contingent.
That's right.
Quite a few cool people came out of Bromley.
Oh, yeah. We learnt all about this again in the Vivienne Westwood biography.
Yes, we did.
But actually, do you know what? It's basically that he's moving around so much because of his dad. And so, like, he grows his hair long and develops a bad attitude. And he says his dad didn't talk to him for 2 years from the time he was 14 until he was 16. And presumably they lived in the same house. His dad was so disappointed with him that he didn't talk to him for 2 years. Isn't that awful?
Terrible. It said they had a silent war. That's a long time.
Yeah.
He actually says that now he believes that his behaviour would be diagnosed as ADHD.
Mm-hmm.
So he was definitely a handful then, wasn't he?
Yeah.
Like, he was a real nightmare.
Yeah, and he couldn't apply himself in school, whereas I think his dad was like a grade A student. So there was a real disparity between his dad and himself. But it's bad parenting not to talk to your child for 2 years.
Yeah, you're right. Oh, yeah, his dad had got a scholarship to a really posh school called the Solihull School.
Mm-hmm.
Solihull. My dad went to Solihull, so I checked with him. I said, do you know the Solihull School? He went, oh, yes, they were our enemies because they were really posh and they used to bully us. So I was like, okay, so that gives me a really good idea of Billy Idol's dad.
Right.
You know. He was an achiever and his son was a punk kid on acid. That's the difference. You are literally going, I've worked this hard to build myself up to make something so that my son can have all the benefit of all the work I've ever done, and all he's doing is growing his hair and throwing it away. This textbook.
Yeah, why doesn't he want to run my power tool hire business?
Yeah, I've created this for him. This is stuff of dreams.
So he says that while he's in Bromley, age 16, he's doing a double paper round and he saves up and he buys his first electric guitar, which interestingly is the one that he has in the White Wedding video. I love that.
It's amazing.
And he says, you know, he's becoming independent now, a working job, so he does have money to buy records and go to gigs and buy flares and stuff, I suppose.
Yeah, and it's just that little bit closer to London so they can get the train into London. And it's at the train station where he meets Steve Severin, who is a bass guitar player.
Yeah.
And he's got this amazing girlfriend called Susie, who later is famous of Susie and the Banshees. And yeah, just the way he describes it, he says it's just the dream couple. And he says it's not like I was jealous. It's just that I looked at them and went, that's the dream. To be in a couple that are that cool.
Yeah.
They obviously were really cool. And they just used to go to gigs together. They saw Lou Reed, Roxy Music, T-Rex, you know, then they started hanging out with the Sex Pistols.
I just love that at some moment in time, there was a teenage Billy Idol and a teenage Susie Sue, and they were just hanging out and nobody knew who they were yet, but they were just really cool teenagers. And in a couple of years, we would all know who they were. I love it.
I think the same. But they weren't Billy Idol or Susie Sue yet.
They were William and Susan.
Yeah, William and Susan.
Yeah, she's a cool dude.
Yeah, I mean, she sounds absolutely out there, doesn't she? Like wearing a Nazi uniform into a gig, a Sex Pistols gig in Germany.
I guess that is out there.
I mean, come on. That is punk. I love that in 1976, the resident band at the 100 Club was the Sex Pistols. They played every Tuesday. I went to the 100 Club recently and I was going, I've heard of this place. Why is this place famous? Does anyone know? And nobody knew. And I was walking around it going, I know this. And now it turns out you'd never believe it's a really swanky place now.
Is it?
You'd never put it together with the Sex Pistols in a million years.
Right.
It's amazing. It's amazing for me to try and picture. It must have been a dive.
Yeah.
Must have been, you know, sweaty and puke and all that. And anyway, he says that it was like a call to arms, the Sex Pistols.
Yeah, and he's finding all of his people there.
Yes.
Yeah, definitely.
It all started coming together.
And so he's meeting everyone now. He's meeting all these other people up and coming in the punk scene. And he's responding to adverts in the Melody Maker and the Music Press because he knows that he wants to get a band together. And he responds to one by a young man called Tony James. Now, do you know Tony James?
No.
Tony James, do you know Sigue Sigue Sputnik?
Yes.
Tony James, so obviously Billy Idol and Tony James will go on to create Generation X, but after Generation X, when Billy Idol becomes Billy Idol, Tony James later starts Sigue Sigue Sputnik.
That's very cool. And also he had been in The Clash, and his best friend was still Mick Jones, so he's really well connected.
And him and Billy Idol hit it off immediately. And Tony James is a great guitarist,
Yeah.
and he can play the bass. And him and Billy Idol would sit together and they write lyrics and riffs and songs. But also he went to audition for another band. Billy Idol goes along and he says to the people there, I'm only going to be part of this band if Tony James can come with me. And so they both get taken on in this band fronted by an older guy called Gene October. And the band is called Chelsea. And so this is their first proper band who start gigging and get a management deal and stuff. So this band, Chelsea, they're all hanging out together and, playing live. And there's a club on the King's Road called Louise's, which is kind of an unofficial lesbian club. And the punks kind of gravitated there and the lesbians embraced them. And it just seems like a really nurturing atmosphere. And it's where a lot of good connections were made. And it's kind of where the punks plotted their rebellion.
Yeah, that's right. It was HQ.
Yeah, this is interesting as well. One of Billy Idol's girlfriends at the time offered to dye his hair, and she was going to dye it black with blue highlights, but she forgot to bring the right dyes, and so she peroxided it first in order to dye it then black and blue, but because she didn't bring the colours, he just kept it peroxide blonde.
And history was made.
Imagine if she remembered her black and blue dye, Billy Idol could be known as a black and blue hair.
Yeah.
God, he looks so good. It's such a good look, that peroxide blonde.
So good. It was the right thing to do, yes. So what happened next?
Well, you know what? He was very nearly in Susie and the Banshees.
Yeah.
Because when Malcolm McLaren put on a festival in Islington, and that had the Sex Pistols, the Clash, and the Buzzcocks all on the same bill. I mean,
Amazing.
How insane is that? And Billy Idol said to him, you should book this new band, Susie and the Banshees, but they hadn't quite got their lineup together. And so he was going to play with them, but he'd already committed himself to Chelsea. So actually, the first lineup of Susie and the Banshees included Marco Peroni from Adam and the Ants and Sid Vicious on drums.
Amazing.
God, it's just...
It really was quite a gang, wasn't it, around that time?
Yeah, everyone was there. I'm so excited by this.
I have to admit to you,
Yeah, go on.
I had no idea that Billy Idol was punk before he was the 80s dance rocker dude. I didn't know he was genuinely a punk. I did not know
Right,
that.
okay. Yeah, no, well, I can understand that because he kind of almost went to America and became a fully fledged pop rock star, really.
Yes, he wasn't a successful punk, as in, he didn't get worldwide fame as a punk.
That whole scene kind of crashed and burned so quickly. And it was so important, and we reference it to this day, but really, it kind of exploded, and then it kind of splintered very soon after.
Shooting star.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's interesting that the people who did survive, I would almost say that Billy Idol is possibly the most successful person in terms of worldwide fame and record sales that came out of that. And I think it's only because he went to America and got the big deal over there, whereas most of the others, I guess, operated from England, maybe.
I think you're probably right.
Anyway, good for him.
Yeah.
Yes. So this band Chelsea that he's a part of, they're playing gigs all over the country. They're supporting Throbbing Gristle, and then they support the Stranglers. But their lead singer, Gene, is older, and Billy Idol and Tony James are writing songs, and they've written one. You know, they're all about the rebellion, the revolution of youth, and they write a song called Youth, 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 and they realise one day that Gene is 30 years old.
Yeah.
And so it would be silly to get him to sing that song. So already they're thinking beyond this band called Chelsea.
How old are they? They're about 21.
Yeah.
Yeah,
they're
they're still
young.
much younger.
Yeah. So it's at this point that they now think, okay, let's go and be a bit more what we actually want to do. We don't need this older singer. And they go and they form Generation X, the punk band that kind of brings them to prominence on the scene.
Yeah, that's right.
So up until this point, he's still called William Broad.
Yes.
But the name Billy Idol comes from a chemistry teacher who wrote on his report, William is idle, as in I-D-L-E. When he went to Louise's, the lesbian club, they had to have an entry card, and he put that name, William Idle, I-D-L-E, on his membership card for Louise's. And so that's how people began to know him. But then he was interviewed quite early on, and somebody asked what his name was. He thought, oh, Billy Idol, but he said that Monty Python were big. and Eric Idle was in it, and he didn't want to be called Billy Idol, spelt like that. And so then it just occurred to him, I can spell it Idol, and that's it. That's how he became Billy Idol.
Brilliant. It's a great name.
Basically, because he was lazy at school. So
Yeah.
that's actually perfect for a punk, isn't it?
Yeah, it really is. But Idol, it just suits him because he's so beautiful.
Yeah. Oh, it's a perfect name for a pop star like him.
And Madonna and Idol.
Yeah.
Doesn't quite work, but...
Do you know what? I honestly think one of the big missed opportunities of the 1980s was to have 80s Madonna and Billy Idol record a duet.
Oh.
I think it would have been the best thing that ever happened.
Yes.
Because they both are so visually amazing.
And they're both punk spirits.
For sure.
Yeah.
Anyway, it didn't happen.
Didn't happen. Oh, anyway, so what happened, right, is the Sex Pistols had gone on telly, sworn, they were sort of poked into it, and they ended up swearing on telly. And then everyone said, no, punks are terrible and scary. We can't let them play in any venues. It shut it all down. So there was nowhere for these bands to play suddenly. So they found a closed nightclub in Covent Garden, bang in the middle of Covent Garden, and did it up. Billy Idol actually built the stage with his own hands. And then they opened this club and played on the very stage that he'd built. And it was called the Roxy. And it's another really important part of this whole history of this whole scene.
It blows my mind that there were actually big nightclub-sized spaces in Covent Garden which were just abandoned.
Yeah, I know, me
But
too.
it's like that's how like the Blitz Club and stuff started as well, wasn't it? It was just empty spaces.
Yeah.
Like every inch of central London has just been commandeered now.
It has now. Yeah, you can't imagine it.
And nothing as cool is happening in them. Like you say, the 100 Club is swanky now.
Oh, so boring, yeah.
Yeah.
There's no dives.
Damn it.
It's the same that happened in New York, didn't it? They just, commerce has swallowed up the cool places.
So it's interesting, isn't it, that the mainstream quashed punk to the point that even like the Marquee Club wouldn't put on punk bands anymore. So, but actually in doing that, through quashing it, you actually force them into this kind of little atom busting out again.
Yeah, that's right.
Almost force them to become bigger, and they're doing it themselves.
Yeah, so I know actually controlling it themselves is what probably got it all going. Big time. Yeah, because Susie and the Banshees opened the club with Generation X, and then the Clash and the Heartbreakers. And he just said, it was sex, drugs, puke. People started spitting at the band. It was disgusting. It was debauched. People were literally shagging in the audience. It was just all going on.
And then Generation X became the house band for months. So they had their regular slot. And that really did bring them for the first time to the attention of managers and record labels. And they started getting offers. But they didn't take them straight away. They just continued to play gigs and tighten up their act as much as a punk band can tighten up the act.
Yeah, they sat on it for a while.
And then they played an industry showcase at the Marquee Club. And then they got a full-time management team out of that. And they recorded a demo, which actually at this point was the first time Billy Idol had ever been into a recording studio.
Yeah, amazing.
So that's how real and authentic it is. For a long time, they've just been playing all these dive bars and stuff regularly. And then they go in and they do their 4-track demo, and they got the record companies fighting over them. Oh, hey, it was actually before they got their record deal. It was Steve Strange who offered to take some of these demos around the record shops of London, and they sold out almost immediately. So that tells you that on the scene, Generation X really got a cult following.
They've got a following.
Which, of course, makes a record company want you.
Yeah, it really does. Also, the fact that he was living in a squat with Steve Strange is amazing.
I know.
Steve Strange being like We Fade to Grey visage.
Yeah.
He wasn't that yet, but it's Boy George's best mate as well.
Yeah, founder of the Blitz Club.
Yeah, and I just never put them together.
No,
I just didn't. So it's really cool.
So the whole punk scene is completely evolving and growing, and, all the punk bands are getting signed. And Generation X get a record deal, and they go with Chrysalis Records, who actually have got Blondie on their books as well. And actually, there's another parallel there, isn't there, between Billy Idol and Blondie, because they're both peroxide blonde.
Bleach blonde and punk.
But also, what's good about Chrysalis Records, and with them having Blondie on their books, I think that shows they've got a good American connection, which is going to be good for Billy Idol in the long run.
Definitely.
So it was a good move to go with a record company that has strong ties to America.
Yeah. Oh, they get on top of the pops.
Yeah, their first single, Your Generation, comes out. So it gets into the top 40 and on they go.
Yeah.
Which, of course, makes them a bit unpopular with the punk scene. Because
Yes,
the punk
because
scene
you've sold
sees
out.
that as selling out.
Yeah.
Like the Clash famously have never gone on Top of the Pops. But then Blondie used to be on Top of the Pops every single week. So if you want to be successful...
Yeah, exactly. But also he says the punk ethics should be, you can do what the fuck you want.
Yeah, exactly.
If you want to go on Top of the Pops, you go on Top of the Pops. Plus, he actually wants to be successful because as much as he's been duelling with his dad had actually made friends with him by getting involved in their record contracts and stuff. Yeah, because they had business in common, so they actually could deal with the business. So
yeah.
He actually does have that thing, even though you rebel against your parent, you also really want to please them. So he wants to be successful, then he can prove to his dad that his dad was wrong.
Yeah, his dad, of course, ever the businessman, is really surprised that he's just got £1 million record contract.
Yeah. But to be honest, coming out of the scene, like with puke and all that crazy behaviour and getting given £1 million, it doesn't seem likely, does it? No. You would be surprised, wouldn't you?
Oh, yeah. So they also, Mark Bolan had a really successful TV show. Generation X actually recorded that show, unfortunately, on the week that Mark Bolan died, which meant the whole country tuned in to watch that episode. It's a tragic turn of events, yeah, but it meant a lot of people got to see Generation X. And already people are saying to Billy Idol, do you know what? You'd be good as a solo artist.
Yeah.
Even though this is years before that happens, it's already kind of planted this seed in his mind that there is life beyond Generation X.
He's the one with the amazing energy and the face.
Yeah.
And he writes a lot of the songs, doesn't he?
Yeah, he does.
Ready, Steady, Go was the next single. Now, that was cracking. I watched that. I didn't know that song. It was brilliant.
Yeah, they
it's got
are.
so
really,
much energy. Yeah.
Really great punk pop songs.
Pop. It is punk pop. Yeah, it's much more accessible to my ears. Yeah, they're properly structured songs.
Okay, so Generation X are successful as far as most English punk bands are. And Billy Idol is being sent off to do the promotional stuff by himself.
Yeah, exactly. They send him off on his own to New York to promote the band, and that's where he hangs out with Blondie and the New York Dolls and Patti Smith, and he's just making friends with everyone. He's having a great time. Then he goes to LA and hangs out with Joan Jett. He's having a great time.
So a divide is actually now happening between him and Tony. And it's kind of almost like they're drifting apart, like socially and creatively, because Billy Idol's away so much. The record company are only paying for him to go and do the interviews and stuff. So the partnership is kind of coming apart slowly.
Yes.
And so the record label say to them, you need a new manager to push you further. Tony just jokes, well, get us whoever works with Kiss. And it turns out that they did actually know the manager of Kiss, a man called Bill Aucoin, and he says sure. So he comes to manage Generation X. At the same time as well, when this divide is happening between him and Tony, this is when he starts getting into harder drugs, and he goes to a party at Phil Lynnett's house, who is the lead singer of Thin Lizzy. After a night at the Blitz Club, they end up at Phil Lynnett's house, and he thinks there's a line of coke on the table. Billy Idol goes over and gives it a good sniff, and he says 10 minutes later he was sick. Phil Lynott says to him, that's not coke, that's heroin.
Oh, beginning of the end.
Yeah, beginning of the end. And in fact, Phil Lynott died of a heroin overdose, didn't he?
Oh, did he?
Yeah. Gosh, it's awful, isn't it?
Billy Idol very nearly did, and it's amazing he didn't.
And it's also at this time that he meets Perry Lister. Did you know about Perry Lister?
No, I didn't. So it's two addictions he gets at the same time, heroin and Perry Lister, because they're very much both addictions, aren't they?
Yeah, for sure.
Did you know about her then?
Yeah, she's very much part of that scene. I knew her as a person.
Yeah, because
from that scene.
He said he felt like he'd met a female version of me, but even wilder. So, I mean, of course she was. And the picture in the book, she's beautiful.
Oh, yeah.
She's a dancer.
Yeah.
She
was in Hot Gossip.
Yeah. They were a dancing troupe, right? Did they do Top of the Pops?
Yes.
Or was that always Pan's People?
No, they had a variety of ones over time. They had Pan's People, Hot Gossip, Legs and Co.
She was obviously very creative, really fun, and just as much of a party maniac.
Yeah, for sure. In fact, what's written about her in this book actually makes me hope that she has her own autobiography, and I hope if she doesn't, we find it.
Yeah.
Because I think she would be a really interesting person because she really is so immersed in that scene. But it also says that her mum and dad were real big time theatre people in the 40s and 50s, and they worked with Noel Coward and stuff. So if she doesn't have a book, I urge her to write it.
Yes,
I'd love to
absolutely.
read it.
Plus, they spent so much time apart when he was on all those tours, but she was always working, doing something interesting.
Yeah.
So it would be an interesting read. Yeah, definitely. We are addicted, aren't we?
Yeah, so we're lucky that we're not like these rock star heroin addicts.
Yeah, these books do not harm our
We're
health.
just addicted to books.
I think my eyes are disintegrating, though.
And there's no room in my brain for any other information.
No. So, yeah, okay. So it all happens at this time. He just heroin, this woman, and then the manager. But then also they go to Giorgio Moroder to get a new producer, and he's busy. And they recommends his right-hand man, Keith Forsey.
Yeah.
These people stay with them for years, including heroin, obviously.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, isn't it amazing to me that he goes to Giorgio Moroder? You're a punk, and you go to Giorgio Moroder, the electronic disco man.
Mm-hmm.
I love that he was mashing up these ideas of music going together that hadn't really gone together before.
Yeah, I think this is part of why he lasted so long and broke out and became the big star, because he moved with the times.
He also created the times, because he created a whole new mashup.
Yeah, I think at the same time, you know, like we said earlier, like Blondie was beginning to do it.
Yeah, she was.
They were punk and they crossed over into disco with like Heart of Glass and stuff. They worked with Giorgio Moroder actually on Call Me, I think. And then when Rapture came out, they started infiltrating the hip hop world. So in a way, Billy Idol's doing the same thing.
Well, now you've made me question whether it was his idea or whether the management that looked after both people suggested it.
Well, it could have happened all at the same time. His music didn't really sound like Blondie music. He's still doing his own thing.
Yes, that's true.
But using the same styles.
Yeah, and the thing that really turned him around, it was all these things, but partly he'd written this song Dancing With Myself that he said was inspired by watching people who were off their head at clubs dancing in the mirrors.
Yeah.
And he loves that song so much he called his autobiography after it, so he's very proud of this song. And then he said he was at this club in New York and he was just sitting there, and when this song came on, everyone rushed off. And he was like, oh my God, they're all dancing wildly. I was right. Because that song had come out and stiffed a little bit, hadn't it? It hadn't got anywhere. And so he was like, no, I was right. They're dancing to it. And so he carried on that track with confidence. And out of that came Moni Moni, the cover, which is killer. Although that wasn't as big a hit as it was when it was re-released as a live version in 1987, which is where I heard it first.
Yes.
But then also Hot in the City, which is so
classic.
Great.
Do you know what's amazing about Hot in the City? When it got serviced to radio, so you know the version we know, in the middle he shouts out New York.
Yeah.
Well, what he did, he recorded 100 different city names.
Oh, he released them in each region.
Each region, because each city has its own radio station. He sent that out with each city's name in it to the appropriate radio station.
So
and that's how they service it to it. It's absolute genius.
It's genius.
Oh, by the way, we haven't mentioned, although it's apparent at this point, Generation X is folded and now Billy Idol's in America being developed as a solo star.
Oh, yeah, on his own.
So he's a solo star now. Yeah,
Yes.
okay. That's fine.
I'll cover it.
Yeah, and so he's working with all of these cool producers. He's making some fantastic punk pop songs. Also at this time, MTV is launching, which actually really helps a lot of these early 80s pop stars come to prominence, because not everybody has music videos at this point.
Yeah.
And so the people who do have music videos and the people who are visually appealing, i.e. Billy Idol, Madonna, Prince, Boy George, you know, they're on high rotation.
Yeah, he said it was so few videos that they played White Wedding pretty much once an hour, which made it huge.
There you go.
Yeah, and then they had a dance mix released because they actually were recording at Giorgio Moroder's studio, which was in his house.
Wow.
I didn't know that fact, but I'm such a disco fan and I love Billy Idol, and you just know what your is.
Yeah.
You know what you like, don't you? You just know.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, and then to release a disco dance mix of White Wedding so they can play it at clubs is exactly what people do to this day. But that was probably quite a new idea then.
Yeah, the dance remix. Yeah, for sure.
All right, can we talk about this completely weird story where he checked into the Chateau Marmont, which is a lot of bungalows in LA. It's in LA, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a big hotel, but
Yes.
apart from the hotel, they have all of the bungalows as well.
Yes. And he says he was on a come down and he was furious because he didn't have any more drugs. So he smashed the whole place up, smashed the windows out. There was just a mess. He'd thrown the TV out the window, whatever. He'd done a classic, terrible thing. He was bleeding. And then he saw loads of police coming. He'd ripped the door off the hinges. So he stood there in the doorway going, oh, they're coming for me. I've done it now. I've done it now. And they went past him and off to another bungalow. And it turned out, by some bizarre coincidence, that night John Belushi was in a different bungalow and had OD'd and died. That's really famous. And I've never imagined there's another layer to that story where over there is Billy Idol standing with his door hanging off, you know.
Yeah, when I read that, all I thought was, because he mentions the hotel manager had come to kick him out, but somebody had convinced her to let him stay. And then come the morning, John Belushi had OD'd. And I thought to myself, that poor hotel manager, that must have been the shift from hell.
Yeah, right. What a night.
What a nightmare. I wonder if she left her job that night.
Oh my God.
So he's, needless to say, a full-blown addict. I mean, we've just read Richard Pryor, and this is kind of on a level, isn't it?
It is, actually, yeah, it is. Anyway, off he goes on tour. The Rebel Yell tour. It's one of those where you set off and you're minor and you come back and you're huge.
Yeah, because everything's happening now at this time. Radio, his songs are all over radio. He's all over MTV. He's touring. He's become a big bona fide star now, right?
Yeah, it's all taking off. And then Eyes Without a Face goes to number 1.
That's a classic song.
Yeah.
He said Eyes Without a Face, which Perry Lister is in that video, actually. I mean, she crops up quite a lot at this point. When he's on top of the pop, she's like playing keyboards for him and stuff. So she's very present at this moment in time because, of course, she quite often isn't. They have such a on-off, tempestuous relationship. Yeah, no, Eyes Without a Face. This is 1984 now, and it's the number 1 video on MTV for 6 weeks.
Yes, it's his breakthrough as a solo artist. He says, Idolmania swept the world. Didn't even know there was such a thing as Idolmania.
Don't forget, we were in little UK. He was hitting it in Australia, Japan, New Zealand. He really was
the whole
breaking
world
through. Yeah. You know, actually, it's interesting. What we've just said about the UK is that Billy Idol, when he was visiting London on his tour, he went to Chrysalis Records headquarters and he said there wasn't a single sign of him or Rebel Yell on any wall in the building. It was all the other acts on the walls. So he smashed the office up and he graffiti spray painted all over the walls. I mean, he's really acting up. He does say actually that he's got a volatile anger problem.
Yeah, no, but it's also heroin and the constant come downs. You know, the uppers and downers. He's also drinking. He's doing he's doing that rock and roll thing of you're on everything there is going. So every now and then you're just going to go nuts. Yeah. Because you're not your normal self, are you?
He's not. And he even says at points, Bill Aucoin, his manager, who's also a massive drug taker, I take it, is sometimes shocked by Billy Idol's appearance because he has scabs on his face and stuff. I mean, he's a real proper horrible heroin addict, somehow maintaining a massive rock star career.
Yeah. But eventually his manager's even more ruined by heroin than he is, and he just can't manage him. He can't do anything, can't even get out of bed. It's just a mess.
So he's like a massive worldwide hot property now, which means everybody wants a piece of him. And he's getting offers from Hollywood that want to do films with him. And he's seen Prince do Purple Rain. He's seen Madonna do Desperately Seeking Susan. I think it's the obvious thing. He thinks he's going to be a big film star. And there's this story that he's read by the guy who wrote the article that became Saturday Night Fever. Anyway, it's called King Death, and it's about a rock star. And in Hollywood, people want to make this film with him. So he's in LA for 6 months, but it never quite happens. And he's actually almost put his music career on hold for 6 months to try and get this film started. And what happens, because he's in LA, being courted by all these film producers, they've put him up in an apartment and he basically has as much coke and heroin as he can handle for 6 months while he's not really working.
You know, he's literally got everything accessible to him. Even when he's getting ruined now on heroin is and all the drugs are driving him mad. Paranoia's hitting him. He says he's hallucinating people. That classic, we've read this before now. Also, it's partly to do with being ripped to shreds when you go out because of the mania, because of being so famous. And like Elvis, he's getting pulled at. That, on top of drugs, can make you so paranoid that he's actually holed up now watching porn 24/7. He says, I don't know why, but it just seemed to make sense. I have been thinking about that. How does watching porn 24/7 ever make sense? It's just, you've really lost it. Yeah, you've really lost your mind at that point.
Yeah, he was hallucinating people in the room with him.
Yeah.
He said that it got to the point he was such a prisoner of fame that he couldn't go anywhere.
Yeah.
So he actually took drugs to go somewhere without leaving his room.
Yeah, and then where you go then isn't a pleasant place because you're getting so paranoid and all that classic thing.
But also what's happening at this point is that him and Perry have had a big breakup. She's gone back to England.
Yes.
Bill, Alcoin, his manager, has left him. Those two, as erratic as those relationships were, they were actually his anchor.
Yeah.
And now they've both gone. And he is basically, in a hotel room going crazy on hard drugs.
Yeah.
So he has a massive psychotic event and people convince him to check himself into hospital, and he only lasted 10 days before. That's actually quite long, I think, compared to some other books we've read. But then he checked himself out, and then, his dad came over.
Yeah, he said it meant the world to him that his dad came, and it might have saved his life. Actually, just knowing your parents are still there for you and your dad still loves you is what he needed to know.
Yeah.
And his parents took him on holiday to Mallorca for 2 weeks where he ate properly and swam.
Yeah.
And he said, I really like this bit because I think it's quite key, because he says that his parents were saying, come on, get up and sing, in the evening in Spain, in Mallorca. Yeah. And he was like, no, I don't want to sing. They go, go on, you get up and sing. And he's like, oh, wow, they don't understand. I'm like Jekyll and Hyde, and Billy Idol is Mr. Hyde. And right now, I'm on holiday and I'm William Broad. I'm sitting quietly reading history books. Mm-hmm. That's who he actually is, just a quiet lad that reads history books.
Yeah.
He has to switch into someone else to become that person. That's the core of the issue, I'd say.
Yeah, yeah. He does say, so when he was in Mallorca with his parents, he did manage to get off coke and heroin, but he said he substituted it with alcohol.
Yeah.
He said he went from the swings to the slide.
Yeah.
So, you're just replacing one addiction with another.
Exactly. And then he went on a 5-month tour and all of his habits came back, basically, probably with a vengeance.
Yeah, this is with the Whiplash Smile album, which is an album I had, and it's absolutely fantastic. So we're in the mid-80s, 1986, and it's a big album with some great tunes on it. So even though all this is going on in the background, he still has a really healthy, successful career.
Yeah, he's still writing some great tunes.
And Perry's back.
Oh, Christ. I don't even want to dwell on this. This is ridiculous. He goes, I'm going to be normal for a bit and me and Perry are going to have a kid and just be normal. But he's having an affair with this other woman because he buys a Harley so he can try not to be off his head, to stay on the straight and narrow so he can drive. Then he has an affair with this woman who has a Harley.
Yeah.
And then... classic, he gets caught on the baby monitor because he forgets that she sat there with the baby monitor. So he's in the baby room on the phone going, I love you, blah, blah. Oh, she's like, she heard it all. So she left, took the kid. Then he fell in love with that woman. She had a kid almost at the same time. And then he fell in love with another woman and had another kid 1 year after. So we had 3 kids within about 2 years with 3 different women.
Messy.
It's just insane.
Yeah.
And wasn't there for any of them, he says. Until much later. There's lots of pictures in the book with him and his kids, I'm sure, when he sort of sobered up years later.
Oh my God, the boy, Willem.
Yeah.
I looked at his Instagram and I thought he put up a picture of his dad. Billy Idol. No, it's him. He looks exactly like him. It is amazing. He's almost a carbon copy.
Wow.
Yeah. So he has 3 kids and he still has his career. He's got another album, Charmed Life, coming out, but he knows he's completely off the rails still. And that's when he just decides at that point to go to Thailand with his friend. And it goes so badly that he's ejected from Thailand by the military, and he's strapped to a hospital gurney and wheeled him out of the hotel with armed soldiers all the way to the airport.
Good grief.
I mean, you think this was the wake-up call,
oh, God. And then when another door opens, another door closes, excuse the Doors pun, but he got asked to be in a Doors film, a biopic, and it would have been a really good acting role. Then he crashed his bloody motorbike, didn't he?
Yeah, I remember that happening, actually.
And he's absolutely laid up.
Yeah, it was really nasty.
Seriously mangled.
Yeah, he broke his forearm, his clavicle, his ribs, and his leg was absolutely... They thought he was going to lose his leg at one point. But of course, that involves a lot of painkillers, so he's high again.
Oh, Christ, yeah. And it ruined his acting career. And then he found out he got cast in the Terminator 2 film as the T-1000, which is an amazing role.
That would have been amazing, because actually the guy who plays T-1000 is iconic anyway, but the fact that could have been Billy Idol somehow is even more amazing. Yeah.
You can imagine it.
Yeah.
That would have really turned him round, turned him up to a different notch, I think.
Yeah, definitely. He had to make do with a little part on The Wedding Singer instead.
Yes.
It is funny when you hear him talk, because it's weird. I know he's such a Brit, but he's also become so American that when you see him in The Wedding Singer and he has almost like a perfect Cockney accent, it somehow doesn't seem right. You expect him to talk American.
Yeah. It's weird.
But it really adds to his charm, actually.
Yeah, it does.
So his music career continues. You know what? It's interesting, actually, because I remember he did bring out an album at the beginning of the 90s called Cyberpunk, which really embraced new music technology. And it got really bad reviews. It didn't sell. And actually, in a couple years' time, people were using that music software, like people like The Prodigy, real groundbreaking dance artists, started using it. He was almost like he was just too ahead of the time.
He said he was ahead of his time, but I didn't know if he was just saying that. And you're now confirming that he was right. I thought he was just being bitter.
Where I wonder whether the people who were doing it at the time were newer bands who were accepted as that, whereas he had a history and it was a change of direction. People probably didn't accept him doing it.
Maybe.
But what was interesting is that he was, like, talking about embracing technology and going into a new age, if you like. He was the first artist to actually have an email address on an album jacket.
Was he?
Like online websites and stuff, he really utilised all of that early technology when people didn't think it was even going to be a thing, you know?
Well, I'll tell you what I did listen to in that era was the soundtrack to Speed.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, which is really good. I really liked it.
Yeah, I've really enjoyed this week just revisiting all of the videos and the music. I mean, I've done that weird thing where I listen to the same song 10 times in my headphones because it's just so bloody good.
Yeah, great. It's really cool. He said that he got such a backlash from that Cyberpunk album that he didn't play for 6 years. He wouldn't play live for 6 years. He totally lost it. And then he'd gone on a biker rally with a mate, pitched a tent, and he was just hanging out. And then Lost Lobos were on, and they invited him up on stage to play with them. And he had an amazing out-of-body experience and realised how much he loved it.
Wow, amazing.
And then he got the band back together, and he said he's been touring ever since. That was 99.
Yeah, and I'm thinking as well, like you're saying, that it's live performance that got him back into it. Because actually it was live performance that started. Punk was very much a live scene. It wasn't about being in the studio making records. It was about live gigs. Thinking about, you said Moni Moni actually came out later as a live version.
Yeah.
Now, that was a massive #1 in the States. And actually, I didn't know whether any other live track had been #1 in the States. Because that's quite unusual for a live performance to be #1 in the singles charts.
Yes.
And I think the fact that happened shows you what a fantastic live performer Billy Idol is. And I think that's where it's at for him. And like we said, watching that duet with him with Miley Cyrus just in the last couple of... I mean, he's on fire. It's electric.
Really great. He sort of came back and became a legend.
He is brilliant. Honestly, this has been one of the most enjoyable weeks. I've loved reading all about Billy Idol.
He's your idol.
No, he is my idol. Until who are we reading next week? Because I'm sure they'll become my
exactly.
idol. So, who is it? Agatha Christie. I'm going to go from Billy Idol to Agatha Christie. She'll be my idol next week. I love doing this podcast.
Me too.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of Thrift Shop Biography. We love making this podcast and we're absolutely thrilled that so many of you are already listening. You could really help us out by leaving us a review somewhere, wherever you listen to this podcast. And if you could share us, tell your friends about us, or drop some links on social media. We have a Facebook page called Thrift Shop Biography, so make sure you come over there to hear about the episodes first and what else we're up to. Okay, see you next week. And if you're new here, there are loads more episodes now to go and listen in the back catalogue, so make sure you go and enjoy them. Okay, thank you very much.